Let's speak with Ella Whelan, columnist, Spiked Online, journalist and all-round nice person. Ella, how are you doing?
Hi, thanks very much.
Nice to have you. Have you been glued to the Culture Select Committee? Because select committees are interesting, aren't they? Because nobody really gives a hoot about them. But every now and again, one of the big ones comes along. You know, whether it's Cummings giving evidence to the Health Committee last year, whenever it was, or a bit of a hoo-ha because, I don't know, Ian Hislop is up there giving evidence. A few celebrities always garners a bit of an audience. And I suppose this was sort of in that ballpark, in that it was all referenced Phillip Schofield, even though it was meant to be about a more general view of television.
Yes, well, I mean, it's always been the case that, you know, particularly with breakfast television, some of the most interesting stuff about it is what we might or might know happens behind closed doors. So
True.
The scandals surrounding it, the affairs, the breakups, the makeups, the relationships between the people, particularly, you know, presenters, the chemistry. I mean, this has been the stuff that's been sort of fictionalized. It turns into that very successful series that was made in America with Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston. There's, you know, the drama of behind the scenes of these big high-profile shows is sort of fascinating. But I've been kind of watching it sort of almost in disbelief that we are discussing the affair, whatever your opinion of it, of a breakfast television presenter in Parliament. You know, that this has become such a big deal that it's now the business of MPs to grill bosses about their relationship with their own workers. I think that's sort of interesting to reflect on, because you know, whatever way it boils down to, whatever your opinion of Phillip Schofield, there is, you know, you have to ask the question, what does this mean more broadly for television? What does it mean more broadly for, I suppose, ethics and the way in which TV is handled? And we've been having that conversation for quite some time. You know, programs like Love Island, you know, reality TV has prompted a bigger discussion about what happens behind the scenes in the making of entertainment. And I suppose this fits into it quite. What I'm trying to say is, I imagine that this scandal is very timely. I don't think we would have been giving it this much attention had it happened 5 or 10 years ago. I think it sort of says something about the way in which we approach things, that it's become this big of a deal. Yeah,
I sense you're right. And I remember when the sort of Schofield scandal, you know, even saying that sounds a bit weird, the Schofield scandal kind of broke, and I think he lost some kind of status with the Prince's Trust. There was a statement that day, or a comment that day I read, where simultaneously Buckingham Palace and the Houses of Parliament had kind of referenced Phillip Schofield. And I just thought, this is insane that the Palace and Parliament are also in on this now. And I sense you're right. I mean, I don't know why this becomes the business of a select. I know what they would say, or why they would say they are doing it, and there's relevances. And I can see other arguments around, you know, things like the Me Too area of life, and, you know, protection of staff, and balance of power. I can sort of vaguely see that, but it still boils down to the fact that, you know, squeaky clean Phil, apart from anything else, you know, is at the centre of this dirty old gossip thing. And it's kind of thick of it personified, really, to see the head people of ITV answering these questions, even though I don't believe a word they're saying, by the way, in terms of we didn't know nothing. You know, I always say this, and I'm tired of saying it, Ella. My next-door neighbour, Barry, knew about it, so how they didn't but he did, I've got absolutely no idea. However, it's just very strange. Is this the right use of a parliamentary committee?
No, I don't. I actually think that this is, you know, sort of what I was trying to hint at is that, you know, the idea that we have to have parliamentary scrutiny, or potentially, you know, some people are discussing new regulations in the workplace of television in order to protect against this kind of thing happening again. I mean, like I say, whatever you think of Phillip Schofield, I think pretty much everyone agrees that nothing illegal happened. Whatever the morals of, you know, the power balance of whatever you think what happened there, as it happens, I'm not as sort of galled by any of it. I'm not particularly shocked by any of it, but, you know, this was a legal, if kind of, I don't know, maybe morally reprehensible thing that happened, which doesn't need to have MPs wagging their fingers over it. This isn't, this, and I don't think this is symptomatic of something wider. But it's funny that you say you don't believe these ITV bosses, because it's sort of it's sort of revealing something that we all knew, which is that squeaky clean Phil, I don't know anyone that thought he was squeaky clean. I mean, we all know that these presenters, Holly Willoughby and Lorraine, or any of the rest of them on other channels, breakfast television. The BBC is terrible for this. You watch BBC breakfast television and we used to laugh about it and think, I bet they hate each other, because no one can smile that much for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And there's all this kind of simpering that goes on. And, most of us know it's fake. It's a show. They probably get off and, go into separate dressing rooms and hate each other. So there's all the drama of that is something that I think we indulge in, because no one actually sits there watching breakfast television section about, a dog with 3 legs who's found a new lease of life and thinks that's wonderful. We're watching it kind of on 2 levels, which is that's a little bit entertaining, but we're also there for the personality. And we know that the personality is different to the performance. So I think it's just it's a bit sort of like pulling the curtains back on a stage performance and seeing behind the scenes. That there are machinations going on in the back. That it's not real, but it's sort of quite rare that you get to see reality this stark and this naked. And I think it's quite entertaining watching the ITV bosses squirm in this way. I suppose maybe it's worth something for that.
Yeah, it is quite something, isn't it? But as you rightly say, Ella, you have to take a step back and go, and this is just all shades of weird that this is happening in a parliamentary sort of, and also just a further point of the irony of MPs, trumpeting the moral code to others is, I suppose, it's just yet another tangent to this mysterious story. But we'll leave that for another time. Let's talk about the COVID inquiry. Talking of inquiries, because this is going to be huge. It's going to be lengthy. It's going to be incredibly costly as well. Are you confident it's going to provide any kind of answers, Ella?
Well, from one pantomime to another, I mean, really, this is almost worse than what's going on with ITV. I think most of us know by now that the level of substance that's going to come out of this inquiry is very small.
Yep.
Forget the kind of weird row that's happening between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, which I suppose is slightly entertaining if it wasn't so depressing if these people weren't in charge of the country. From the get-go, this inquiry wasn't asking the right questions. It's hung up to a point of kind of obsession on Partygate and things like that, things that actually most people at this point don't really care that much about. And it in many places asks questions like, should we have locked down harder or sooner? Or did we not do enough to restrict people's liberty? When in actual fact, probably most people at this point want to be asking the opposite question, which is, well, what were the harms in us shutting down schools? What were the harms in us taking the particular economic policy we took for years on end? Has anything to do with, what were the harms that were caused by politicians removing civil liberties and enacting emergency powers? At least a bit of balance is kind of all I'm asking for. So, something which throws a bone to those of us who were lockdown critics and at least represents that side. None of that's going to have any kind of result, because that would basically mean all politicians, because they were all in favour of locking down very hard and very fast, most of them anyway, a few notable exceptions, admitting that they were wrong. And it's I have absolutely no time for Boris Johnson at the moment, as much as I dislike his sort of pantomime enemy in Rishi Sunak, because he's come out and said, or it's been rumoured that he's come out and said, oh, well, I always thought that this was a bad idea and I raised said to so-and-so at the time. And you just think, it was too little too late. You didn't say it when it was necessary. You didn't say it when you were in power. So I think this just really leaves a kind of bitter. It's something that should resolve, or at least give us a sense of security that in the future with public health challenges, we will do things differently and better. But I think for most people, this inquiry is just leaving it's dredging up some very bitter things, whether it's people's genuine deep anger about the mistreatment of people in care homes, about the death of their loved ones, about not being able to go to people's funerals. All of that is coming back up, and it's leaving a real bitter taste in people's mouths. So I think it's been horrendously mishandled.
We'll talk more, Ella, in a few moments, particularly what a non-man is as well. Have you seen this story? Man alive, this is just barking mad, this stuff. Ella Whelan, journalist, columnist with Spiked Online, with us on TalkTV.